if you're watching mainstream media or have been listening to this debate over statues over the last, let's say last decade, just to keep it fresh.
Sure.
Much of it, you hear folks say, well, that shouldn't be our focus in the movement. That shouldn't be our focus. We should be focusing on these systemic issues. But, now you're seeing people warm up to it that probably weren't so, I've seen people's positions change just in the last few weeks on this. What really stood out to me in the argument was that so many of these statues were put up in the last 100 years. And I don't think I didn't know, I really didn't have any. I mean, obviously with Christopher Columbus, that's an obvious one that I didn't go up when he found, he discovered the Americas, quote unquote, discovered. But let's talk a little bit about that. Like, why did these statues get placed around this country, especially in places that, the North, for instance? Why are there Confederate statues in Pennsylvania?
Right, because, this is my, armchair, psychoanalyst of, what's going on here. I think it's people whose only kind of self-worth comes from whiteness. Like they feel threatened by the browning of America, by, the left having more influence, what have you, all these things. I think they feel they need to find something to hold on to. And for a lot of people who don't know their history, who don't have a lot of self-worth and don't have any substance behind their being, they grasp at anything that makes them feel better than others. And the one thing that so many people can feel that way about is being white, because if you're white, it makes you automatically better than everybody else. And it's a really sick pathology that is easily avoided if you just have decency and basic intellectual curiosity and people who actually don't all look like you. And it's much easier to kind of distance yourself from the mythology around whiteness. The whole Christopher Columbus thing is a joke, because any white person who's upset about it, even if they're Italian American, because the guy did this for Spain, number one. Right. He didn't discover anything. That's a fact. Right. And he never stepped on U.S. soil, modern U.S. soil. He didn't do any of those things. And he was just a real bastard, right? He was just a really awful human being. And if you're Italian American, you can't think of one person who represents your culture, who represents the best of this country and the old country, then you're just lazy, because there are a lot of folks to choose from. Any ethnic group in this country, whether you're Black or Jewish or Italian American or Greek American, you got to find at least one person that you're really proud of. And if you can't, then it is a farce. And I think for most people who are in Philadelphia, in South Philly, who maybe right now are armed with bats, with golf clubs, with AR-15s. I don't know how many of those white people are actually Italian American, but they are angry white guys who feel threatened because they have little tiny egos and understanding of history. And, I don't know if we can help them. I don't have the energy to do that. Maybe other people can do that. But there is a growing percentage of white folk of all generations who are finally understanding that their fates are intertwined with that of Black and brown folk and indigenous folk. And that's part of the glimmer of hope I have. This is the first time I've seen that type of solidarity ever in the 50 years I've been on this planet. So that's good news. And the other thing is symbolism matters. Symbolism matters. It is connected to the substance of what we believe. And if we feel that, these institutions are so powerful and these images are so ingrained that nothing can ever change that, and all of a sudden you see the most venerated things start to dissolve, you start to get hope that the institutions that built them up can dissolve too. And that is the type of progress we need to see, where that symbol is connected to substance. And we can and will make that happen, because we've done it before.
Yeah. There was an article in the New York Times, I believe it was today or yesterday, and in it they were talking about the statues, and Robert E. Lee Jr., or Robert E. Lee's great-grandson, I believe, was referenced in this piece saying, you know, when he was a kid, he would walk by the statue of his great-grandfather, or great-great-grandfather, I guess you could say, and felt like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like my name. And then like, oh, he has a nice little feeling. And then over time, as he became educated, it felt a little uncomfortable and he didn't know. And it's the same name. I mean, he lives with that name too. But then it wasn't until he saw a decade ago or so, he saw armed white nationalists protecting the statue that he came out publicly and said that statue needs to go down. So,
well, I got to tell you, that guy is my cousin because Robert E. Lee's father is one of my ancestors. So some of my ancestors are some of the worst white supremacist rapists you could ever imagine. And when I found out about my history doing genealogy when I was in my 20s, shortly after I graduated from college, it was painful to try to find out, to track the footprints of my African ancestors and keep bumping into the people who raped them. Yeah. And that is so much a part of this culture. When we talk about patriarchy, when we talk about violence, it is part and parcel of what it means to be an American. And that's not something we should be proud of. Right. And we have to disassemble these myths and narratives and symbols and substance to get at what we truly want to embrace, to find any greatness, any potential in this country, because we've never achieved it. We've never been anywhere close to it, but we have the possibility only if we work together and we look at these ugly truths and we find beauty by saying, we're not going to pretend it doesn't exist. We're going to learn from it. We're going to learn from it together. And that's a radical thing to do. It's really never been done. The best example I can come up with is abolitionism, because that was multi-ethnic, multi-faith. It was all kinds of folks. And I think we can learn a lot from the abolitionist movement and apply it to modern day times. And I think there's a lot of hope we can have. And I'm not an optimist by nature. I am a student of history. And it's because of that study of history that I feel that we should be affirmed in what we're seeing on the streets and how these mass protests are substantively impacting policies that can move us towards systemic change. The elites do not want to let us believe that we can topple things that seem intractable, seem intransigent, when in fact we absolutely can, because we've done it before.
Chris, you're brilliant. We need more Chris's elected. Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous that, you're representing Philadelphia. Can you come to New York when you're done and run for governor?
See if I can annex Queens.
Exactly, it'd be great. Where our governor decided that it was the time to, talk about, not even present a police reform bill. Our Democratic governor, who also thinks, Columbus should be protected because he's a good Italian man. That's Governor Cuomo. Right. So you want to talk to your family members about how Governor Cuomo ain't that great. There's a lot of reasons. That's the best. That's the one of today. Thank you for watching and listening to the Nomiki Show. Make sure to click like and subscribe on YouTube and share with everybody on social media. And of course, if you're not a patron already, please join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for as low as $5 a month. That money makes a huge difference. We don't have the corporate money coming in. We're not cable news that's raking in the dough from advertisers right now as everybody's sitting at home and watching. It is really you guys who are keeping us together. So please consider being a patron. And for those of you who have already, we are incredibly grateful to you.